I'm so thrilled to talk about this case. This is maybe my favorite case in this game. Very, very close with Turnabout Trump, and I think it's surprisingly really sharp and restrained where it needs to be in this first half. It succeeds in making the last case feel big and weighty in lieu of like a bridge to the Turnabout, which could only conclude so strongly because it was built on the 3 games of build-up and development. To try for an ending of that magnitude that wraps up this game and these characters nicely is an incredible feat, and while perhaps it spends too much time trying to make every disassociated piece click where it doesn't have to, it really is a masterpiece and it's immensely fun. So here we are in part 1 of 2 of the ending of Apollo Justice, Turnabout Succession, How to Write a Sequel. In order to understand it myself, I had to know the story of these last 7 long years. Nothing happens by chance. All is connected. And now, you stand ready to begin the final chapter of this story. Will the defendant be found guilty or innocent? The decision is yours. Okay, holy shit with this intro. I really think this is one of the best introductory sequences in any Ace Attorney case, period. The point of these is sometimes to give you a clue as to who we should suspect. This is especially true of early cases like 1-1, where the fun of the case, Shu Takumi says, is in catching the killer, not quite figuring out who the killer is. But oftentimes, because you're seeing previews for a case you don't know anything about, it can effectively create intrigue and interest immediately, but it's short-lived because, well, who are these people and what's happening? This case has the inherent advantage of being able to tease information we're already somewhat privy to. So we can ask questions next to each other like, who is this girl and why is she falling over dead? And what is Christoph Gavin doing here? We can say, what does the poker game and the Borscht Bowl Club have to do with this case? And what's happening with those 3 who look like they're in the troupe? It tells us explicitly that all is connected, and we absolutely do have a few lingering questions from the cases prior. I think the payoff is really satisfying, of course, but oh my god, does the build-up do its job so perfectly here. So we start in the right talent agency. Phoenix and Trucy are way up there for best duo in this game, next to Trucy and Apollo and Gavin, because man, they're so cute and have such a goofy relationship. They're so good together. Phoenix is finally ready to tell Apollo about his secret mission he's been teasing this entire game. He's working on the jurist system. What a brilliant idea for this game. There are these external dramatic stakes that reframe how you interact with court cases. The idea is that 6 jurists work with a judge to help figure out a ruling for court cases, and of course, for this practice run of the jurist system, you're the defense attorney. Phoenix gives Trucy a sealed letter of the Grammarys, which he says will be crucial later, but not to open. I love that Phoenix this entire game is just sort of fucking with Apollo and refuses to give him any heads up or like cue him in on anything. We meet the defendant who, yeah, Vera Measham is the best defendant in any Ace Attorney game design-wise. She is so insanely cute. I fucking love her so much. Her blue hair and purple sweater and bandana. She's got purple socks and the back of her jeans have little purple accents. She is a treasure and I love her so much. She's completely silent, and I really love Apollo trying to be charismatic and likable with a girl he probably thinks is pretty and absolutely striking out over and over again. So we head to her home, the scene of the crime, Drew Studios. The victim is Vera's father, Drew Measham. And this is an interesting little crime scene. There are paintings strewn everywhere, a post box, a little desk, and a coffee mug with poison residue around the rim. Apparently, his daughter poisoned the coffee while he was being interviewed. So we test for more poison, and the only place in this apartment that we can find any is on this small inch-large frame. Emma lets us check the contents of the red letter with this case's minigame, which I actually quite like. It lets you scan layers of something and trace out the shapes beneath. So we scan the inside of this letter, which mentions depositing $100,000 in exchange for something. We go to meet Valent Grammary, who is acting especially goony and is performing a show soon because the copyright on his master's tricks runs out after 7 years in a few days. This is good storytelling. Valent seems to be a decent enough magician, but he's clearly not terribly creative or driven if he seems so hellbent on being able to recycle these 7-year-old tricks that he didn't even invent. We show him the Grammary letter and he freaks out and begs us to give it to him, but of course we refuse. He mentions the reporter that was interviewing the victim the night of the murder, Spark Brushel, so yeah, let's go meet this fool. Alright, so let's get this out of the way. This dude is an absolute clown. I've heard lots of people dislike him because he's annoying, which, yeah, but I quite like him because I think he's well characterized. His animations are very expressive, and he's at least a little bit less one-note than some of the witnesses in previous games. I like his gimmick of really loving his job as a reporter and compulsively looking for a scoop, and his constant presentation of sentences like headlines. It's silly, but it's better than Walkie's dumbass black scent. I like that he weirdly brushes his teeth a lot, and everyone says he smells minty and that his nose goes crazy when he has a scoop in mind. So we talk to him for a bit, and he tells us that Drew Measham was not just an artist, he was a forger. So we return to the apartment with this in mind and go to scan beneath his paintings to find something kind of genuinely surprising. Beneath these 3 paintings in the apartment are sketches of 2 people playing poker, a man dragging a stand, and a tower with a guitar on fire. This is really surprising because we expected a break in the case, but it wrapped back around to Apollo's first 3 cases. Instead of a lead or a break, we're left with more questions. How does this case, the first in the jurist system, have to do with Apollo's previous 3 cases? So, with all of this in mind, we go to court. Alright, so this is the brilliance of this case here. This case is so simple. There's a lot going on and it starts winding tremendously in the second half, but for a game which has gone pretty big in the first case and bit off way more than it could chew in Turnabout Serenade, these first 2 days of court are shockingly tempered and careful. This case doesn't have eyes bigger than its stomach and is brilliant in its simplicity and ease of access. The reason is simple, because there's another case coming up, but for this last case of a reboot to make the main bones so concise and easy to follow is absolutely why this case can bang the notes it means to. There are some nerves here from everybody because the case is being watched by the 6 jurists. There's a subversion of this later which is brilliant, but for now we have to be reminded that the jurists are watching from elsewhere so that we can forget it during the drama and have it brought back up later in spectacular fashion. And to keep everything sharp and crisp, we waste no time with a detective's testimony jumping straight to Spark Brushel's account of the murder. Because this is the last case and testimony is not immediately simple to contradict, we're going to have to put one of his 3 statements on the record and present a piece of evidence that we'd have to remember a detail about. The fact that Measham couldn't have been poisoned right as his lips touched the coffee because the poison was slow acting. So Spark changes his testimony to say that Drew was writing a letter before he died and perhaps he was writing a suicide note. This is strange testimony and doesn't lock perfectly with the case anyways because it just doesn't make any logical sense in that way. It doesn't feel like a rebuttal. It feels kind of like a hammy way to mention the letter. But the contradiction comes in the form of his mentioning a yellow letter. So great, this one's easy. We notice a red letter at the scene. Now we have to do the worst part of this case, the perception. It's obvious to me that the statement, "Say what you will, but Drew's talent was without compare," is the contradiction because it smells like a contradiction, but holy shit, where to look was so difficult for me. This is my main problem here with this gimmick. It's very difficult to maneuver around his body quick enough, and the nervous tick is seemingly random, where I thought Spark had a lot of personality in his design and animation. It would have been really easy to give him a nervous habit that was concurrent with his personality. Remember, he's holding a brush here he could fiddle with. We've seen his nose act up a bunch, he's compulsive about brushing his teeth, and his eyes sometimes swell up behind his glasses. So that's a lot of characterization. His sprite's really good. So when I'm supposed to wander over to the least dynamic part of his sprite and find that his armpits are sweating, I don't know, it's really not good. But the contradiction digs up his forgery and perhaps a motive in Drew Measham's connection to the criminal world. We turn to something that may have escaped the crime scene, a certain missing yellow letter that Drew was apparently writing. It's possible that it was picked up by the mailman and the contents within disappeared. The interesting connection comes with understanding. He would have had to lick the stamp to the letter before writing it. A stamp that fits perfectly into our small, inch-long frame which had atroquinine residue on it. The coffee mug didn't poison Drew. It was the exact opposite. His poisoned lips touched the mug. But the crime is so wonderful because it takes the murder weapon away attached to the letter. What better way to kill someone that doesn't leave his home and without a trace? Emma shows up to test the red letter, which mentions sending a return stamp to Drew for atroquinine residue, and it reads positively. So the theory is that Drew got the letter 7 years ago, sniffed out the trap on his life, framed the stamp, and used another. Case closed. In a kind of fun reversal, the judge says, on Apollo's side, I see no need for further debate, when Clavier objects very coolly. Objection! Is this the bright future of our legal system? He mentions the obvious contradiction. If Drew Measham knew the stamp was poisoned, why lick it 7 years later? We have to follow kind of a winding trail of logic here. Perhaps Drew Measham isn't the one who sniffed out the trap. Perhaps it was his daughter. Maybe further, she's the one the letter was addressed to as the actual forger. This idea is totally wrong, but it gets us a bit further, and it gets us to Vera admitting that, indeed, she is the artist between them, and that Drew is the one that dealt with all the logistics and stuff. And there, we break for recess. It turns out Vera Measham is a master at not just forging paintings, but receipts, signatures, and journal entries. She's capable of forging evidence. And again, we have a fucking fantastic thematic connection between this case and the game. Recall that Phoenix was disbarred for using falsified evidence, and we won the first trial only because Phoenix gave us fake evidence. That was the only way we could win, and this idea as well is crucial, that the only way to defeat Gavin in the current legal system was to falsify evidence. Vera paints her nails intermittently, and we notice her chewing on them on the stand. She's also staring daggers at Gavin, nervously. So it turns out Vera testifies that the reason neither of them used the stamp sent to them was because it was a cute stamp and they wanted to frame it. This is pretty funny. Normally with like a turn the case on its head moment like this, you have to suss it out for yourself, but I like that Vera just tells you, because too often in these games, witnesses could save so much time just by telling you what they honestly know. Cool as ice Clavier Gavin begins to sort of freak out and asks her about her first job forging evidence. She tells him she forged a page in a journal, and he shouts at her and gets upset. We have never seen him a fraction of this level of worked up. He seems tremendously anxious. Somehow Gavin knows what the evidence was. He describes the journal back to her, which she responds to affirmatively. This is major intrigue, it's great writing. Once again, the simplicity of this base case leaves so much room for the cast and the case from 7 years ago to shine. He's told you nothing, has he? Your soiled, sullied mentor? Nothing? Phoenix Wright. Who else? He never told you about the trial 7 years ago? About how he came to lose his attorney's badge? It was a certain piece of evidence that decided his fate, you know. A certain diary. On the back, it bore the mark of a silk hat. Apollo demands to know who asked for the forgery to be made. Now pause. This is S-tier misdirection in writing. From all we've heard about Phoenix, and beyond that, from the way he's behaved all game, we are clearly talking to somebody who has changed since Trials and Tribulations. We have seen him forge evidence for us. It seems clear who propositioned Vera to forge the evidence. The way Apollo is reacting is tremendously smart and becoming of what he knows and how he adores Phoenix. How Gavin reacts is becoming of what he remembers from the trial 7 years ago, and he seems to be catching on to the larger picture about how he was misled and how a few people were wronged. This is all ringing loudly in the player's head when Vera says the one who propositioned her was... Just then, she collapses, muttering, "The devil." Text flashes across the screen. Defendant Vera Measham. Condition: unconscious. Examiner's diagnosis: acute atroquinine poisoning. The recording of this case ends. Original trilogy music plays, and we get text saying that we'll have to go back to see the original case as we see cute little Trucy, and holy shit, Gavin looks so hot in that trial. To be continued. So, oh my god, this is such a good tease. I've made a video about how well Bridge to the Turnabout wets your mouth for what's to come later in the case, and man, this is close. It's like being at the top of a roller coaster because all the build-up in this game, every weird plot point and disconnected idea are clearly converging at the bottom of this hill. There's a lot to look forward to, and I really think this case ties everything together in a satisfying way. There are legitimate gripes a lot of people have with the logic and the investigation of part 2 of this case, but I'm going to defend it because I think it works really well. So get excited for part 2 of this video because this series on this channel is also at the top of a hill. If you like this video or series, give it and the channel some love. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your attention immensely. I love you.